The gunfire erupted in Eden Medical Center's VIP wing at exactly 10:43 p.m. on a Wednesday night. That was when everything shattered. Patricia J. Clark would later remember the sound, not the screaming, not the chaos, but the specific crack of bullets piercing the floor-to-ceiling windows of Korea's most exclusive private hospital. She would remember the marble floor, imported Italian white stone, turning crimson. She would remember her hands pressing against the wound in her chest, the same hands that had saved countless lives now desperately trying to preserve her own. What she couldn't forget was the platinum band on her left ring finger, still warm against her skin, engraved with Korean characters that translated to a single possessive word, mine. Her husband, Choi Kong, the name that made Seoul's underworld tremble, was 7 blocks away when it happened. By the time he arrived, trailing 20 armed men through the hospital's executive entrance, Patricia had already flatlined twice. This is the story of how an American nurse became the obsession of Korea's most dangerous man, and how that obsession painted the pristine floors of a luxury hospital with blood. If you're loving the story so far, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. 3 months before the marble floors turned red, Patricia J. Clark was having an ordinary Wednesday night shift in Eden Medical Center's VIP wing when the dangerous stranger walked through her door. He arrived at 8:59 p.m. with a bullet in his left shoulder and an entourage that made the hallway feel smaller. Patricia looked up from her charts as 4 men in dark suits flanked the entrance, their eyes scanning the pristine corridor like predators assessing territory. The man at the center wore a Tom Ford suit, his expression carved from stone despite the blood seeping through his shirt. "Gunshot wound," he said in perfect English, his voice flat, emotionless. "Upper left quadrant." Patricia snapped on her gloves without missing a beat. "Exam table." "Shirt off." She'd worked Saturday nights in Atlanta's Grady Memorial before coming to Seoul. Gunshot wounds didn't impress her, and neither did expensive tailoring. While he removed his jacket with minimal wincing, impressive pain tolerance, she noted clinically, she prepped her instruments with practiced efficiency. "How long ago?" she asked, not looking up. 45 minutes. "Through and through?" "Yes." "Good. Makes my job easier." Her colleague Nurse Kim appeared in the doorway, went pale, and immediately retreated. Patricia noticed but didn't pause. She irrigated the wound with steady hands, her touch firm but not gentle. This wasn't a man who wanted coddling. "You're not going to ask how it happened," he observed. "Not a question. Not my business. I treat the wound, not the story." Patricia threaded her suture needle. "This will hurt." "I'm aware." She worked in silence, each stitch precise. Most patients flinched, cursed, gripped the table. This man sat perfectly still, watching her face instead of her hands. It was unnerving, that dark gaze tracking her every movement, but Patricia had been unnerving men her entire life just by existing, black, female, unafraid. She wasn't about to start being intimidated in her own examination room. "You're very calm," he said finally. "You're very still. We're both professionals." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Interest, definitely. The head of security knocked softly, hovering anxiously in the hallway. Patricia ignored him, tying off her final suture with a small snip. She bandaged the wound efficiently, then finally met those calculating eyes. "Change the dressing twice daily. Antibiotics for 10 days. See your regular physician in a week for suture removal. Any questions?" "No." "Then we're done." She stripped off her gloves, turning to her notes. He stood, buttoning his ruined shirt over the fresh bandaging. "You don't know who I am." "Should I?" The question hung in the air. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but close. "No," he said softly. "But you will." After he left, Nurse Kim rushed back in, gripping Patricia's arm with trembling fingers. "Are you insane? That's Choi Kong. Don't you know who that is?" Patricia remembered those words later, when the orchids started arriving. When everything changed. But in that moment, she just shrugged. I've treated gang members in Atlanta emergency rooms, Kim. He's just another patient. She had no idea she'd just caught the attention of Seoul's most dangerous man. No idea that her dismissive professionalism had done what fear and respect never could, made her unforgettable. The hunter had found something that didn't run. And Choi Kong never let go of what intrigued him. The orchids started arriving on Thursday. Patricia found the first arrangement at the nurse's station, a stunning Paphiopedilum orchid in deep burgundy, so rare she had to look up the species. The black card tucked among the blooms contained only 2 letters in silver embossing, CK. Secret admirer? Nurse Kim teased, though her smile looked nervous. By Friday, 3 more arrangements had arrived. By Monday, Patricia's apartment lobby looked like a botanical garden. Her building's concierge stopped her with barely concealed awe. Miss Clark, we've run out of space. Should we send some to your apartment? Absolutely not. Patricia stared at the exotic blooms filling every available surface, Dendrobium kingianum, Vanda coeruleum, species that cost hundreds of dollars each. Who's sending these? The cards just say CK, ma'am. The delivery service is. Get me their number. Now. She called from the hospital break room, her annoyance sharpening with each transferred call. Finally, a manager's apologetic voice, I'm sorry, Miss Clark, but our client has requested anonymity. We're not authorized to. I don't care what you're authorized to do. Stop delivering to my home. The contract is prepaid for 1 month, ma'am. We're obligated to. Patricia hung up, fuming. Her colleagues had started whispering, giving her strange looks. Even Dr. Park, the VIP wing director, seemed unusually interested in her flower situation. That evening, her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered with clipped irritation. Patricia Clark. You told them to stop delivering. That voice, smooth, controlled, unmistakable. The patient from Wednesday. That's unfortunate. I was enjoying your reaction. Patricia's breath caught. How did you get my number? The same way I know you take your coffee black, that you're from Atlanta, and that you've worked at Eden Medical for 8 months. He paused. Have dinner with me. Excuse me? Tomorrow. 8 o'clock. I'll send a car. I don't even know who you are. Yes, you do. You looked me up after Nurse Kim's warning. His certainty was maddening because it was accurate. Did you find what you were searching for? Patricia had found plenty. Choi Kong. 34 years old. No public occupation, but his name appeared in the shadows of business deals, real estate acquisitions, and, most disturbing, unsolved cases involving organized crime. The Korean forums she'd struggled through with translation apps painted a picture that made her blood run cold. Underground king. Untouchable. Dangerous. I found enough to know I should hang up, she said. But you haven't. Damn him. She hadn't. The orchids are beautiful, she admitted grudgingly. But excessive. I don't do anything in moderation, Patricia. You should understand that before you decide. Decide what? Whether you're curious enough to see for yourself who I actually am. Not what the internet says. Not what your colleagues whisper. His voice lowered, intimate. I think you are. I think that's why you're still on this call. Patricia's heart hammered against her ribs. Every rational instinct screamed to refuse, to block this number, to request a transfer to a different hospital wing. She'd treated him with clinical detachment, nothing more. This was insane. But she thought of his stillness under her needle. The way he'd watched her without flinching. The dark intelligence in his eyes that suggested he saw past every defense she'd carefully constructed. One dinner, she heard herself say. Public place. And the orchids stop. The orchids continue. But I'll concede the public place. She could hear the smile in his voice. For now. He hung up before she could argue. Patricia stared at her phone, heart racing, knowing she'd just made a choice she couldn't unmake. Her reflection in the break room window showed a woman standing at a precipice, leaning forward instead of back. She was entering a world where normal rules didn't apply. And God help her, part of her wanted to see how far down it went. The restaurant didn't exist on any map. Patricia realized this as the black Mercedes pulled into an unmarked building in Cheongdam-dong, Seoul's wealthiest district. The driver opened her door with military precision, and she found herself led through a marble lobby to a private elevator that required a keycard to operate. "This is not a public place," she said to Choi Kang's assistant, a severe woman who'd introduced herself only as Miss Yoon. "It's the most public Mr. Choi gets." The top floor revealed a single dining room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River. Patricia's trained eye caught the telltale thickness of the glass. Bulletproof. The table was set for two with understated elegance, no flowers, she noted with grim amusement. Choi Kang stood when she entered, wearing a charcoal suit that made him look like he'd stepped from the pages of a luxury magazine. "Patricia. You came. One dinner." That was the agreement. "Please, sit." He dismissed Miss Yoon with a subtle gesture. They were alone. Patricia chose her chair carefully, keeping her back to the wall, an old habit from Atlanta. His lips curved slightly, noticing. "You grew up in Bankhead Courts. Section 8 housing. That's where you learned to sit with your back protected." Her spine stiffened. "Excuse me? Your father left when you were 7. Your mother worked double shifts at Grady Memorial, the same hospital where you'd eventually train. You put yourself through nursing school with 3 jobs and graduated with $52,000 in debt." He poured wine with steady hands. "You paid it off in 5 years. Impressive discipline." Patricia's hands clenched in her lap. "Did you have me investigated?" "I investigate everything I value." "You don't know me. You treated me once. One time. Once was enough." His dark eyes met hers without apology. "You didn't flinch. You didn't ask questions. You touched me like I was human, not dangerous. Do you understand how rare that is? So you violated my privacy? Dug into my life like I'm some kind of..." Patricia stood abruptly, chair scraping marble. "This was a mistake. Your brother John is serving 9 years in USP Atlanta for armed robbery. You visit him every time you return to the States." Choi Kang's voice remained calm, factual. "You send your mother $500 monthly even though she hasn't spoken to you in 2 years because you refused to bail John out again. You have a scar on your left shoulder from a bottle thrown during a domestic dispute in your apartment building when you were 15. Patricia's breath caught. The scar was hidden beneath her dress. "How could you possibly?" "Your medical records. Your rental history. Your bank statements. Your visa application." He stood, moving closer with predatory grace. "I know you chose Seoul because you wanted distance from Atlanta's ghosts. I know you work 70-hour weeks because stillness makes you uncomfortable. I know you eat lunch alone because you don't trust easy friendship." "Stop." Her voice shook with fury and something else, something that felt like vertigo. "You had no right. I had every resource." He stopped just within her personal space, close enough that she could see the faint scar where her stitches had been. "The question isn't whether I investigated you, Patricia. The question is whether you're brave enough to stay now that you know what I'm capable of." She should walk away. Every rational cell in her body screamed it. This man had stripped her bare without permission, demonstrated power that made her feel exposed and vulnerable and utterly known. But she was already in too deep, wasn't she? The moment she'd answered his call. The moment curiosity had overridden caution. "You're insane," she whispered. "Probably." His hand lifted, not touching, hovering near her cheek. "Have dinner with me anyway." Patricia closed her eyes. Felt the weight of his attention like physical pressure. Understood with crystalline clarity that she'd lost her anonymity the moment she'd sutured his wound with steady, unafraid hands. Normal rules didn't apply here. Safety was an illusion. He'd already seen everything. She opened her eyes and sat back down. One dinner, she repeated, her voice steadier than her heartbeat. Then we talk about boundaries. His smile was dangerous and warm. I don't believe in boundaries, Patricia. But I'll pretend. For you. She'd just made a Faustian bargain. And God help her, she wanted to see what hell looked like up close. The designer gown arrived at Patricia's apartment with a handwritten note, wear this tonight. CK. She left it in the box and wore her own black dress instead, simple, elegant, paid for with her own money. Small rebellions mattered when everything else felt like surrender. The restaurant was in Gangnam, its entrance so discreet Patricia almost missed it. The moment Choi Kang's Mercedes pulled up, the maitre d' appeared like a summoned spirit, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched his knees. Mr. Choi. Everything is prepared. Inside, the dining room held perhaps 30 guests. As Choi Kang entered with Patricia on his arm, conversation stopped like someone had cut the sound. Every head turned, then quickly averted. Within minutes, tables began emptying, diners requesting checks, making quiet exits, leaving half-finished meals. They're leaving, Patricia whispered, horrified. They were asked to. Choi Kang pulled out her chair. I wanted privacy. You cleared an entire restaurant? I cleared 3. You chose this one. His tone suggested this was perfectly reasonable. Patricia sat slowly, watching the last patrons file out. Armed men materialized at every exit, not overtly threatening, but unmistakably present. The staff moved like choreographed dancers, terrified and efficient. You're not what I expected, Choi Kang said, eyeing her dress with something like approval. You didn't wear my gift. I don't take gifts from men who think they can buy me. I don't think I can buy you, Patricia. That's precisely why I want you. The first course arrived, something exquisite she couldn't name. Patricia forced herself to eat, to maintain composure while her world tilted sideways. Finally, she set down her fork. What exactly do you do, Choi Kang? I control everything the law doesn't reach. Real estate, entertainment, imports, protection. I fill the spaces where legitimate business ends and necessary reality begins. His honesty was almost clinical. I run Seoul's most efficient underground empire. You're a crime lord. I prefer alternative governance, but yes. Patricia's hands trembled. She gripped her napkin to still them. How many people have died because of you? He didn't flinch. Didn't look away. More than you can forgive. Fewer than I can justify. The answer landed like a physical blow. No lies. No softening. Just truth, brutal and complete. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to choose me anyway. Choi Kang leaned forward, his gaze intense. I want you to know exactly what I am and decide that the monster is worth the man. I want informed consent, Patricia, not innocent complicity. That's insane. Yes. His hand covered hers on the table. But you're still here. You wore your own dress to prove you're not owned, then sat down at my table anyway. You're still here. She was. God help her, she was. The dinner continued in surreal intimacy, just them in an empty restaurant, armed shadows at the periphery, talking about mortality and morality like other couples discussed movies. Patricia asked questions. Choi Kang answered with devastating honesty. The attraction between them built like pressure, undeniable and dangerous. In the car afterward, Seoul's lights blurring past bulletproof windows, Choi Kang finally asked, should I take you home? Patricia looked at him, this beautiful, terrible man who'd laid his darkness bare and dared her to embrace it. Every moral compass she possessed pointed toward safety. Every instinct she'd honed in Atlanta's dangerous streets screamed danger. But she'd spent her whole life being careful, being good, following rules that had never protected her anyway. No, she whispered. He kissed her then, and Patricia understood with perfect clarity that she was choosing damnation with open eyes. His mouth was firm, demanding, and she met him with equal hunger. The kiss tasted like excellent wine and terrible decisions. When they broke apart, breathless, she saw her reflection in the dark window. A woman at the point of no return, leaning into the fall. I can't promise you safety, Choi Kong said quietly. I can't promise you peace. I know. But I can promise you truth. Always. Even when it destroys us. Patricia touched his face, tracing the hard line of his jaw. Then we're both insane. Probably. He pulled her closer. But we're insane together. She could no longer claim innocence. The choice was made. The seal was set. And Patricia had never felt more alive. The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Patricia jerked awake, fumbling for her phone, expecting the hospital. Instead, Miss Yoon's voice, controlled but strained. Something's happened. Mr. Choi is asking for you. What happened? Is he hurt? Not physically. A car is downstairs. Patricia dressed in the dark, pulse hammering. In 3 weeks of dating Choi Kong, she'd never been summoned like this. The Mercedes waited at her curb, rain drumming against its roof. Miss Yoon's expression revealed nothing during the silent drive to Hanam-dong. The house, calling it a house felt inadequate, sprawled behind 12-foot walls and security gates. Modern architecture, all clean lines and bulletproof glass. Beautiful and fortified. Patricia had never been here before. Inside, the silence felt wrong. No staff. No bodyguards. Just emptiness that echoed. Third floor, Miss Yoon said quietly. The study. He won't see anyone else. Patricia climbed marble stairs, her wet shoes squeaking. She found him in a room lined with books and shadows, standing at the window overlooking Seoul's glittering sprawl. Rain streaked the glass. He didn't turn when she entered. Choi Kong? My brother is dead. His voice was flat, hollowed out. Ji-hoon. 26 years old. Shot 4 times in Itaewon 2 hours ago. Territorial dispute with a Russian crew. Patricia's breath caught. She'd seen the photos on his desk during previous conversations, a younger man with Choi Kang's eyes, softer features, genuine smile. The baby brother he'd protected, kept distant from the worst of his world. I'm so sorry. I got him killed. He finally turned. His face was composed, but his eyes were devastated. He wasn't supposed to be there. I told him to stay away from that district. But he went anyway because he wanted to prove himself. To me. Photographs covered the desk, childhood snapshots, graduations, birthday celebrations. A whole life reduced to paper memories. Patricia crossed the room without thinking, pulled him into her arms. He stood rigid for a moment, then broke. Not tears, Choi Kong didn't cry. But his body shook with suppressed anguish, his breath ragged against her neck. Everyone I love dies or leaves, he whispered. My father. My mother. Now Ji-hoon. Everyone. I'm here. Patricia held him tighter, this dangerous man crumbling in her embrace. I'm right here. They sank to the floor together, Patricia cradling him against her chest while rain battered the windows. He talked through the night, about Ji-hoon's laugh, his terrible singing, his dreams of legitimate business. About the guilt of building an empire that devoured even those you tried to protect. Patricia listened, stroked his hair, offered the only comfort she could, presence. She didn't leave when his grief turned to rage. Didn't flinch when he described the retaliation already in motion. Didn't judge when he confessed the darkness that lived in his soul. As dawn broke gray and cold over Seoul, Choi Kong fell into exhausted sleep against her shoulder. Patricia watched light creep across his face, touching the hard lines grief had carved deeper. She loved him. The realization was quiet, certain, terrifying. Not the dangerous attraction or the thrill of his intensity. Real love, the kind that sees someone's worst and chooses to stay anyway. The kind that makes you vulnerable. The kind that gets people killed. His enemies would know now. Would see this grief, this weakness. Would understand that Choi Kong had something to lose beyond power or territory. Patricia pressed her lips to his hair, breathing him in. Rain and expensive cologne, and underneath, just human warmth. She'd become essential to his humanity. Which made her the perfect target. And she stayed anyway. Dr. Park's assistant delivered the summons at the end of Patricia's shift. The executive board requests your presence. Immediately. The conference room on the 10th floor was reserved for serious matters, malpractice reviews, terminations, crisis management. Patricia entered to find 5 board members seated like judges, their expressions carved from stone. Director Kim sat at the head, fingers steepled. "Miss Clark, please sit." She sat. Her stomach dropped when she saw the manila folder centered on the polished table. Director Kim opened it with clinical precision. Photographs spilled across the surface, Patricia and Choi Kong leaving the restaurant in Gangnam, his hand at the small of her back. In his car, kissing. Entering his Hanamdong residence at dawn. The images were high resolution, professionally captured. "We've been monitoring the situation," Kim said, voice cold. "Given Mr. Choi's reputation. You had me followed?" Patricia's voice cracked with fury and humiliation. "We protected our institution's interests. Eden Medical Center cannot afford association with organized crime." He pushed another photo forward, Choi Kong at Ji-hoon's funeral, Patricia beside him in black. "This is unacceptable. My personal life is none of your..." When your personal life involves Seoul's most notorious criminal, it becomes very much our concern. Dr. Park leaned forward, and Patricia saw something almost sympathetic in her eyes. "You're an excellent nurse, Patricia. But this association compromises our reputation, our licensing, our patient safety." Director Kim's voice was final. "Effective immediately, you're on administrative leave pending investigation. We're also obligated to report this relationship to immigration authorities." The words hit like physical blows. "You're reporting me? We have no choice. Your visa sponsor is this hospital. If you're terminated, and you will be, your legal status becomes invalid." Patricia walked out on shaking legs, her badge and access card confiscated. She made it to her car before the tears came, hot, angry, devastating. 2 days later, immigration enforcement knocked on her door at 6 a.m. They were polite but thorough, searching her apartment while she stood in her pajamas, humiliated and terrified. The lead officer handed her an official notice. "You have 72 hours to arrange departure from the Republic of Korea. Your work visa has been revoked." 72 hours. 3 days to dismantle the life she'd built. Patricia called Choi Kong with shaking hands. "They're deporting me." He arrived within the hour, still wearing yesterday's clothes, eyes dark with controlled fury. "This is the Huang family. They pressured the hospital board, pushed immigration. They're using you to weaken me. I'm losing everything." Patricia's voice broke. "My career, my life here." "No." He gripped her shoulders. "You're not losing anything. My lawyer is already. Your lawyer can't fix this. I'm being deported, Choi Kong. Do you understand? In 3 days, I'm gone." The silence stretched between them, heavy with impossible choices. "There's one way." His voice was quiet, careful. "Marriage. To a Korean national. It would grant you permanent residency, override the deportation." Patricia's breath caught. "Are you?" Patricia's breath caught. "Are you? Marry me." Not a question, not quite a proposal. A solution delivered with desperate pragmatism. "It's the only way to keep you safe, keep you here." "That's insane. We've known each other 6 weeks." "I know." His hand cupped her face with unexpected gentleness. But I also know I'm not letting them take you. I know I'll use every resource I have to keep you in Seoul. And I know that if you leave, you'll be vulnerable in ways I can't protect. Patricia closed her eyes, felt the weight of the choice crushing her. Marriage to Choi Kong meant binding herself to his world forever. It meant choosing him over everything she'd built independently. It meant becoming his wife, his weakness, his target. But it also meant staying. Fighting. Refusing to let his enemies win. "This isn't how I imagined getting proposed to," she whispered. "This isn't how I imagined proposing." His forehead touched hers. "But nothing about us has been conventional." 72 hours. 3 days to decide between deportation and damnation. Patricia opened her eyes and saw her future in his, dangerous, complicated, and irrevocably hers. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay. Yes." The wedding dress arrived in ivory silk and French lace, a masterpiece that probably cost more than Patricia's entire nursing school education. She left it hanging in the guest room and wore a simple white sheath instead, knee-length, elegant, hers. Small rebellions still mattered, even at the altar. The ceremony took place in Choi Kang's study at sunset, witnessed only by Miss Yoon and his lawyer, Mr. Han, the legal minimum. No flowers, no music, no pretense that this was anything but a strategic necessity wrapped in legality. The officiant, a nervous judge who clearly owed Choi Kong favors, rushed through the Korean proceedings with trembling efficiency. Patricia barely heard the words. She focused on Choi Kang's hands, steady when hers shook, warm when hers felt ice-cold. When the judge prompted them for rings, Choi Kong produced 2 platinum bands from his pocket. He slid hers on first. Later, Patricia would discover the inscription inside, "Yours." His own band, which she placed on his finger with fumbling care, read, "Mine. Possession and surrender, bound in precious metal." The judge pronounced them married in Korean, then English. "You may kiss your bride." Choi Kong cupped her face with unexpected gentleness, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. The kiss was soft, reverent, nothing like their previous desperate encounters. When he pulled back, his eyes held something that looked almost like wonder. "Mrs. Choi," he murmured. The name felt foreign and permanent, like a brand. After the witnesses departed, they stood alone in the study that had become their chapel. Rain began falling outside, appropriate, Patricia thought numbly. Even the weather mourned her independence. "I wrote vows," Choi Kong said quietly. "The officiant wouldn't allow them, but I want you to hear them anyway." "Choi Kong. You'll have everything except freedom. I'll give you everything except safety. But you'll always have me. My protection, my resources, my loyalty. My truth, even when it destroys us. And my love, for whatever that's worth from a man like me." Patricia's throat tightened. That's either the most honest or most terrifying wedding vow ever spoken. Both, probably. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "What would yours have been?" She hadn't prepared vows. Hadn't allowed herself to think of this as a real wedding. But standing in the fading light, wearing his ring, legally bound to Seoul's most dangerous man, the truth emerged. "I vow to see you. Not the monster everyone fears, not the king everyone serves. You. The man who grieves his brother, who knows every detail of my life because he actually cares. The man who'd rather be honest than comforting." She squeezed his hand. "I vow to stay, even when staying is terrifying. To choose you, even when choosing you costs everything." His kiss this time was different, desperate, grateful, almost broken. They clung to each other as darkness fell over Seoul, 2 people bound by necessity discovering something that felt dangerously like devotion. That night, in his massive bed with silk sheets and bulletproof windows, they didn't make love. Instead, they talked through the darkness about what their marriage actually meant. The legal protections. The permanent target on Patricia's back. The impossibility of divorce without his enemies sensing weakness. "There's no going back," Patricia whispered against his chest. "Is there?" "No." His arms tightened around her. "But there's forward. Together. She fell asleep to the rhythm of his heartbeat, fragile hope warring with profound fear. Morning arrived with brutal publicity. Miss Yoon brought the newspapers on a silver tray, front page of every major publication, Underground King weds American nurse. Photos from the wedding, somehow obtained despite the privacy. Patricia's face, clear and identifiable, next to Choi Kang's. How did they? Someone in the judge's office. Choi Kang's voice was cold. They've been handled. Patricia stared at her own image, now permanently linked to his empire. Every enemy, every rival, every law enforcement agency, they all knew her name now. Knew exactly how to hurt Choi Kang. She was officially, publicly, irrevocably his wife. And the entire underworld was watching. Patricia was 3 weeks into her unofficial return to Eden Medical's VIP wing, working under a consultant classification that bypassed her terminated employment, when the Huang family sent their message. It was 11:23 p.m. on a Wednesday. She was updating charts at the nurse's station, the marble corridor empty except for the soft beep of monitors and the distant hum of HVAC systems. The executive entrance required keycard access. It shouldn't have opened. But it did. 3 men in dark suits walked through like they owned the building. Patricia looked up, instinct screaming wrong before her mind processed details. The lead gunman was young, methodical, his weapon already drawn. Patricia Choi, he asked in accented English. Choi Kang's wife? She ran. The first bullet shattered the floor-to-ceiling window behind her. The second caught her in the left shoulder, spinning her against the wall. The third hit center mass as she stumbled, and Patricia went down hard on imported Italian marble, her blood spreading across white stone like a grotesque art installation. The pain was distant, shock already dulling sensation. She pressed her hands against the chest wound, nurse's training overriding dying, and thought absurdly about how Choi Kang would hate that she'd bled on his favorite floors. The gunmen left as efficiently as they'd arrived. Someone was screaming. Patricia realized it was her. Then darkness swallowed everything. She woke 2 weeks later to beeping monitors and Choi Kang's voice, rough from disuse, speaking Korean into his phone. Her eyes fluttered open. He stood at the window, silhouetted against Seoul's skyline, and she'd never seen him look so hollowed out. Choi Kang, she whispered. He dropped the phone. Crossed the room in 3 strides. His hands framed her face with devastating gentleness, and Patricia saw his eyes were red-rimmed, haunted. You died, he said hoarsely. Twice on the operating table. Your heart stopped for 4 minutes the second time. Patricia's hand found the bandages across her chest, felt the echo of torn flesh and shattered ribs. The Huang family? Gone. One word, flat and final. Gone? 17 days, Patricia. That's how long it took to dismantle their entire organization. Every lieutenant, every soldier, every business front. Huang Wei himself, his voice cracked. I made sure he understood why he was dying. Made sure he knew your name was the last thing he'd hear. Patricia stared at this man she'd married, seeing the darkness he'd unleashed painted across his features. How many? 43 confirmed. More probably. No remorse, just hollow accounting. I burned their empire to ash and salted the earth. I made them a lesson no one will forget. He'd committed mass murder while she slept. Waged war across Seoul's underworld. Become the monster everyone feared, because they'd hurt her. I can't, Patricia's voice broke. I can't live like this. Waiting to be killed. Watching you destroy people because of me. I know. Choi Kang pressed his forehead to hers, and she felt wetness on his cheeks. I know. But I don't know how to be anything else. Then learn. Her hand gripped his shirt, weak but determined. Because if this is our life, violence and retaliation and blood, then I didn't survive for anything worth surviving for. The silence stretched between them, heavy with ultimatum. Outside, Seoul glittered with false promise. Inside, Patricia could feel her heartbeat against reconstructed ribs, each pulse a reminder of mortality. The Huang family wanted to send you a message, she whispered. They sent one to me instead. This world will kill me. If not them, someone else. There will always be someone else. Choi Kong pulled back, studying her face like he was memorizing something precious and fragile. What are you saying? I'm saying choose. The Empire or me. The violence or us. Because I love you, God help me, I love you, but I won't die slowly waiting for the next attack. She saw the war in his eyes. Saw him weighing power against love, control against surrender. This was the man who'd built an underground kingdom, who didn't compromise, who'd told her he didn't believe in boundaries. But he'd also sat beside her hospital bed for 2 weeks, giving orders between prayers. Okay, he said finally, voice raw. Okay. I'll find another way. Patricia closed her eyes, exhausted and uncertain and alive despite everything. The worst had happened. She'd paid the blood price. They both had. Now they had to decide if survival was enough, or if they needed to build something worth surviving for. The marble floors had been replaced during her coma, new stone, white and unmarked. But Patricia would always see the ghost of her blood there. Some stains went deeper than surface. Physical therapy was agony mapped across Patricia's body in surgical scars and shattered nerve pathways. 6 months post-shooting, she could barely lift her left arm above shoulder height. The chest wound had healed into raised tissue that pulled with every deep breath, a permanent reminder written in flesh. Choi Kong attended every session, watching from the corner with clenched jaw as she gritted through exercises that left her sweating and nauseous. I can't live waiting to be killed, Patricia said one evening, exhausted and aching. I can't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering which rival will come next. He was quiet for a long moment, then knelt before her chair, taking her trembling hands. Then I'll build you a world where you won't be. Choi Kong. I mean it. I'll dismantle everything. Go legitimate. It'll take time, negotiation, paying off debts and calling in favors. But I'll do it. His grip tightened. For you. For us. The transition took 18 months. Patricia watched him methodically convert underground operations into legal enterprises, real estate legitimized through proper channels. Entertainment venues operating above board, import businesses restructured with transparent accounting. Some associates accepted buyouts. Others didn't, and disappeared into Seoul's underworld mythology. The violence didn't stop immediately. But it diminished. Redirected. Transformed. The Grace Foundation launched on what would have been Ji-hoon's 28th birthday. Named for both Patricia's middle name and Choi Kang's lost brother, it established community health centers in Seoul's poorest districts, places where people couldn't afford Eden Medical's marble corridors. Patricia stood beside Choi Kong at the groundbreaking ceremony, her hand resting unconsciously on her still flat stomach. She'd discovered the pregnancy 3 weeks earlier. Hadn't told him yet. Wasn't sure how to reconcile new life with their violent history. That night, she finally spoke the words, I'm pregnant. Choi Kang's face transformed, terror and wonder warring across features usually so controlled. Patricia. I'm keeping her. Keeping this. Even if you're not. He kissed her silent, then dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her stomach. Her? Intuition. Or hope. Maya, he whispered. Maya Grace. If you'll allow it. Patricia's hands found his hair, and she understood they were building something new from the ashes of what they'd destroyed. Maya Grace Choi was born 8 months later in Eden Medical Center, the same hospital where Patricia had nearly died. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Dr. Park, reinstated as Patricia's physician, delivered the baby with gentle efficiency. Choi Kong held his daughter with hands that had ordered deaths, wept with eyes that had witnessed atrocities, and whispered promises of protection Patricia prayed he could keep without violence. 5 years later, Patricia stood in the bathroom of their Hanamdong home, dressing for the Grace Foundation's annual gala. The scars were visible in the mirror, shoulder, chest, the roadmap of survival across her torso. She didn't hide them anymore. Choi Kong appeared behind her, now clean for half a decade, his businesses legitimate, his empire transformed into corporate holdings and philanthropic foundations. He traced the raised tissue of her chest wound with reverent fingers. "Do they still hurt?" he asked quietly. "Sometimes. When it rains. When I breathe too deep." Patricia turned in his arms. "But they remind me we survived. We did more than survive." His hand moved to the window, where Maya played in the garden with her nanny, her laughter bright and uncomplicated. "We built something good from all that blood." Patricia watched their daughter, 5 years old, brilliant, protected but not imprisoned, loved without possession. The Grace Foundation now operated 12 clinics across Seoul. Choi Kong sat on boards of legitimate corporations, advised startups, mentored young entrepreneurs. Their wedding ring still read "mine and yours," but the meaning had evolved. Not possession. Partnership. "Do you miss it?" Patricia asked. "The power, the control?" Choi Kong considered, honest as always. "Sometimes. But then I come home to you and Maya, and I remember what I would have lost." He kissed her scarred shoulder. "This is better. Harder, sometimes. But better." Outside, Maya shrieked with joy, chasing butterflies through manicured gardens that had once been approached only by armed escorts. Inside, Patricia and Choi Kong held each other, their bodies bearing permanent marks of violence transformed into survival, then into purpose. The marble floors at Eden Medical had been replaced years ago. The Grace Foundation clinics were built on different ground entirely, community spaces with linoleum and hope, where Patricia worked 3 days a week, where her scars made her credible to people who'd survived their own wars. She'd married the devil and her hospital floor had become a bloodbath. But they'd both emerged from hell carrying something sacred, the chance to choose healing over harm, legacy over empire, love over fear. The scars would always remain. Some wounds never fully close. But they'd learned to build futures on broken ground, to plant gardens where blood had spilled, to raise a daughter who would never know the cost of her parents' peace. Maya's laughter drifted through open windows, bright and uncomplicated. Patricia closed her eyes and chose, again and always, to believe that love could redeem even the darkest origins. That monsters could become men. That blood-stained marble could be replaced with foundation stones of mercy. And that sometimes, survival was just the beginning of the story worth telling. Thank you for watching this video to the end. I'm sure you enjoyed it. So click on the image showing on your screen to watch the part 2.